Hey, this is Jody with Welding Tips and Tricks. It seems like every time I go to do a stick welding video, it's going to be at least 95 degrees in the shop. I just finished up the stick portion 7018 fill and cap on a 6-inch 6G. It's been a while. A little rusty, shaking the rust off. No excuses. It is what it is. But I hope something I did here today helps you out, especially if you're getting ready to go take a 6G test and your job depends on it, which most of the time it does.
All right, really quick review here. We're going to go through the little prep. You need to prep on anything that's going to be TIG welded, and there's a TIG root hot pass on this. You need to prep it clean, bright metal, no mill scale at all, within about a half inch of where you're going to weld it. So I got that first tack in there now, and it needs 3 more, about 90 degrees apart. You need to talk to the test supervisor about how long the tack should be. Some of them are real particular on, they wanted half inch, no more than a half inch, no more than 3/4, no more than an inch, whatever. And especially on the smaller diameter pipes. And we need to feather the tacks with a grinder, and then really pay a lot of attention to how high you position the pipe joint. You generally have a choice on how high you put it, but once you decide, and once that's it, sometimes they'll actually ask you to tack weld it and stamp it and things like that, where you can't rotate it, you can't move it, you can't raise it, you can't lower it. So if you raise it too high, you have a hard time seeing on the top. If you raise it too low, you're in a bind on the bottom. So it's important. Now I'm not walking the cup on the root here. I'm just freehanding, resting my finger on a TIG finger, because I use a scooting back type motion on a root pass like this. I don't like to do any side to side type motion, and that generally pushes it through, gives me a little bit of root reinforcement. It just works for me. Hot pass, I don't mind walking the cup at all. I just don't spend a lot of time across the middle. Now for the stick pass. You see, I don't like to put the rod in there like that, like you would normally weld a lot of structural stuff, because when you get on up to the top, of the pipe joint, your rod's burning, getting shorter, you get in a real bind up there trying to keep a good rod angle. So what works for me is putting the rod in there kind of backwards, kind of downward like this, to where as that rod gets shorter, as I twist my wrist, I can keep the same rod angle from bottom to top, or from however long the rod burns, from bottom to 90 degrees or whatever. Just turning the wrist as the rod gets shorter keeps a good rod angle. Same thing on this side. Just turn your wrist the other way. Just keep turning your wrist as you weld, and it's easy to keep that rod pointing pretty much straight in, which is kind of what you want to do. So we'll light up off the bottom here. I'm choosing to put one bead over top of that hot pass, and I'm using 1/8 rod here. If they let you use 3/32, it might be a good idea. There's a trade-off though. 3/32, you're going to have a lot more tie-ins, or 1 or 2 more tie-ins anyway, whereas a 1/8, you're only going to probably have 1 tie-in between getting from the bottom to the top. But it's a little bit a little bit more risky as far as blowing through. I have blown through before, going to take a test and putting that root pass in, and then coming back over with a 7018, and here goes a hole and you're done. So that's nothing sucks worse than that, to drive a long way and then take a test and blow a hole in your root pass. But I've decided to put 1 pass over top of the root pass here as opposed to 2, because when you put 2 passes over top of something that narrow down in the groove like that, you really got to stack them in there right, or it's hard to get that second one in there. You can leave yourself a tight crevice, and it's really you can have lack of fusion, you can trap a little slag or whatever, whereas just a slight weave is a lot less likely to trap any slag or anything. It's a preference thing, and also it might be stipulated the test you're taking. They might want 3/32, they might want 2 passes. You just have to ask. I just decided to put one 1/8 7018 pass over top of that root and hot pass. You see I have ground the start there because it had a little bit of a high place on it. So coming up the other side, it makes for a lot smoother tie-in if you grind the start on the first pass, if they let you grind. I have taken tests before where after you get the tacks feathered, they want the grinder back and they hand you a file, and everything's filing from there on out. They don't want it to be a grinding test, they want it to be a welding test, which I totally get, because some people get carried away and want to grind every single pass slick, and that's just not smart, not necessary, shouldn't ever be necessary. If you have high spots, little, after the first pass is done like this, if you have little high spots on the tie-in, now's the time to knock them down with a grinder. I'm in pretty good shape here to go ahead and run 2 more passes over that, and then I'm going to be in good shape for the cover pass. It'll take 2 passes over that for a good fill, though. Again, I light up ahead of where I want to start, then weld over all those arc strikes, and I'm just kind of lining up halfway over that first pass. I'm trying to leave the bevel. I'm trying not to come all the way out to the bevel, so I have kind of a nice sharp line to put a nice cover pass on. You can see I ground there already where I started to make for a nice tie-in on coming up the other side like this. I use a very slight electrode manipulation, just a little bit, to kind of play the light back and forth, help me see where I'm going. And on tie-ins, I do the same thing as when I start. I light up a little bit ahead and then come right into the crater. Give that 7018 just a second or so to heat up so I can avoid porosity if possible. I got 1 pass over top of that first pass, and now's a good time to knock down any little high places on tie-ins and everything, if it's permissible. Now you can see where I've got the rod stuck in there. If I'd have stacked that bead up a little higher, it might put me in a jam where I'd have to take a grinder and kind of wallow that out a little bit. But I'm in pretty good shape here to burn that second pass in there with the 1/8 rod, so no grinding necessary. Now I would generally like to run a little hotter than this. I'm only running about 110 amps here, and the thing about pipe is that when you light up on the bottom, you're welding overhead, which you can stand to weld overhead about the same as you can weld flat, about 120 amps or so. But very quickly you start into the vertical position, and 120 amps is a little bit hot to vertical, and then you'll be crowning up and undercutting and all that stuff. So pipe is kind of a trade-off. You got to set the amperage at a place where it's hot enough for overhead, vertical, and then flat again as you get to the top of the pipe. So again, I'm running about 110 amps here, but I've got the dig set high up to about 77, so I can keep a tight arc and not stick and keep everything under control. So far things aren't going too bad. Got a little bit of that second pass left to put in there. And again, I don't want to melt that straight line of the bevel away if possible. If I come right up to it, that's fine. But I want to, it's kind of like when you're coloring when you're a kid. It's kind of nice to have lines and borders to stay in. So if you keep those lines straight, when you put the cover pass on, you got a better shot of making it uniform if they're not all chewed up. So I'm not in too bad a shape here. What I want to see before I put a cover pass on is I want to be slightly below flush, and that's the bottom right there. So I would take a grinder and knock any crowns off that I thought were going to give me a problem. But I'm not in too bad a shape here to put a cover pass on. And I'm going to go for a 3-bead cover pass. And what I'm watching for here, this is the first bead. I'm doing a little bit of electrode oscillation, I guess you call it, but I'm just trying to overlap the edge of that bevel by about 1/16 of an inch, no more than that. I've seen guys get carried away and go way out wide, a good 1/4 inch past each side of the bevel, and that's just over welding. More opportunity for things to go wrong, takes more weld, more bead, more problems. Why ask for trouble? So just overlap that bevel by just a little bit. I mean, you don't want to just nip it because you can risk not nipping it, but a 1/16 of an inch is a pretty good rule of thumb on how much to overlap the edge of the bevel. And if you take the edge of the rod right to the edge of the bevel, the puddle will flow out a 1/16 of an inch. All right, we're going up the other side now. Again, you can see the edge of the rod, the bottom of that 7018 rod is just about aligned with the bevel when I oscillate it, and then I let the puddle kind of fan out whatever it wants to past that, which is roughly a 1/16 of an inch. 1.6 millimeters for everybody else in the world. So that's what it looks like with that first pass of the cover pass on there. I made it a little bit wide, a little bit heavy, but that was kind of intentional to kind of give me a shelf to build the rest of the passes on. I won't go quite as slow on the next two, but that kind of establishes the height of my cover pass, and then just lets me overlap that first pass by half. And here I'm coming up the other side, same thing, overlapping by about a half, and then not quite tying into the top of the bevel. And we're speeding things up here now because I'm trying to keep the video a reasonable length. Here's the last bead. The last bead, I'm really eyeballing the top of that bead because I don't want to leave any undercut at all if possible. So I'm keeping a tight arc, not doing a whole lot of oscillation, and I'm going slow enough to fill in any undercut that might happen. Since I'm not low at all, I'd have to kind of be shaky and whatnot to get any undercut, so it worked out okay. So I'll put the little cup brush on here and shine it up a little bit so we can take a little peek at it, see how we did. So it's not too horrible, not anything to write home about, but that's the bottom you're looking at right there, where all the tie-ins are and where it should be uglier than the rest of it, and it still doesn't look too bad on the bottom. Alright, well, here is a quick rundown of the settings used for this joint. Root pass 110 to 120 amps, hot pass 120 amps, 1/8 inch gap, feather edge using 1/8 rod, also 3 millimeter for every other country, ER70S2. I use the Miller Dynasty 200DX, 100 to 110 amps with the Technoweld 7018 1/8 rod, dig set to 77. Now, if you like what you saw in this video, I'd like to encourage you to hit the like button, comment, subscribe, and all that. But also, I'd like to invite you to visit the forum at forum.weldingtipsandtricks.com. And while you're there, I'd love for you to register and participate and post. I think you'll find it is an extremely helpful forum. We are not interested at all in pissing contests here. We have a philosophy: be helpful or be gone. So it's a bunch of helpful folks just trying to help each other get to the next level and help each other become better welders. So check it out, visit, hang around, learn something, register, post, participate, whatever you feel comfortable doing. Thanks for watching. Again, visit weldingtipsandtricks.com.